No one thought that Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan would come to his party meeting for a routine political diplomatic discussion. He surprised everyone and dropped a bombshell, saying, "We must be strong. Just as we entered Karabakh and Libya, we may do the same with Israel." Despite the controversy sparked by this statement, it is perhaps important to remember, first and foremost, that the Nagorno-Karabakh region Erdogan speaks of was retaken by Azerbaijan with the help of both Israel and Turkey, meaning that those who supported Azerbaijan and were allies are the same ones whom the Turkish president wants to invade today. As for Libya, the Turkish army intervened militarily without real resistance from anyone, exploiting the civil war in the country. Here, before answering the question of whether the Turkish president is serious this time in his threats when he said he would be strong and cover the threat, and why, there are many indications that Erdogan says a lot and does little. Many reactions to the Turkish president's threat were summed up in a famous line of poetry by the Arab poet Jarir. Al-Farazdak claims that he will kill Morabat/rejoice in a long peace, O Morabat. Before detailing the event and some of its repercussions, the record of tension between Turkey and Israel escalated following Erdogan's statements and his threat to invade Israel, as he allegedly did in Karabakh and Libya. He suggested that having power would allow for such a step, especially with the ongoing Gaza war that has lasted for about 11 months. Israeli politicians did not delay their response. Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz said that President Erdogan was following in the footsteps of former Iraqi President Saddam Hussein by threatening to attack Israel, and reminded Erdogan of Saddam's fate, stating, he should remember how it ended in Iraq. The leader of the Israeli opposition, Yair Lapid, claimed that President Erdogan was talking nonsense again, and considered that Erdogan posed a threat to the Middle East. Lapid went further by calling on the world, especially NATO members, to strongly condemn what he described as Erdogan's terrible threats against Israel. In the face of the Israeli attack on Erdogan, not only threatening him but also belittling his abilities, the Turkish Foreign Ministry had no choice but to enter the scene with a statement in which it considered that the end of the perpetrator of genocide, in reference to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, would be similar to the end of Nazi leader Adolf Hitler. Now, if we take the proper distance from these altercations, we might see the reality, or rather the evidence, that many present to downplay the importance of Erdogan's threat, primarily by recalling the amount of threats Erdogan directed at Bashar al-Assad since the outbreak of the Syrian revolution in 2011 and for more than a decade. Even as recently as a year ago, he was threatening to topple Assad and accusing him of being a war criminal, threatening to resort to military action in war with Syria to end Assad's rule while presenting himself as the supporter and primary backer of the Syrian people, hosting millions of Syrian refugees in his country. Today, we can simply see how Erdogan is courting Assad, considering him part of the family, and making every effort, even if for just one meeting. Additionally, there is the beginning of the repatriation of Syrians to their country amidst growing racism against them in Turkey. If we look at the facts of Israel-Turkey relations, we become more convinced that Erdogan cannot act against Israel. Let us recall what happened a few weeks before the Al-Aqsa flood, when Erdogan and Netanyahu smiled at photographers in New York on September 10th. For those who don't remember, we remind them of what Netanyahu said: the similarity of our ties is a sign of our improving bilateral relations. At that time, the two appeared friendly before the cameras in a joking atmosphere. Their dialogue included Netanyahu saying to Erdogan, "I like your tie," and Erdogan replying, "The shirt and tie are both similar." These jokes contained the truth that the English word tie means both tie and relationship. Perhaps we can say that these jokes and humor are more realistic than Erdogan's threats today to invade Israel. The fluctuating relations have never been able to break the strong bond of mutual interests between Ankara and Tel Aviv. Since 1949, Turkey was the first Muslim country to recognize the State of Israel. Israel's founding father, David Ben-Gurion, also held Ottoman citizenship and spoke Turkish, having studied law in Istanbul. Economic relations remained strong between the two countries. Before the Justice and Development Party came to power in 2002, trade and tourism were flourishing in both directions, and defense cooperation was on the rise. Even Israeli pilots trained in Turkish airspace, and Israeli technicians upgraded Turkish warplanes. Other crises occurred since then, mostly related to Palestine, but nothing changed the reality that relations between Ankara and Tel Aviv were bigger than all this. Despite numerous political crises in the past, the bilateral economic relations between Israel and Turkey were unaffected. In fact, they improved even during times of crisis. The trade volume increased sixfold over the past 20 years of the Justice and Development Party's rule, from $1.41 billion in 2002 to $8.91 billion in 2022. Israel has become one of Turkey's most important trade partners, with a record number of approximately 700,000 Israeli tourists visiting Turkey in 2022. As for why Erdogan is threatening Israel today with invasion, it is simply due to the enormity of what is happening in Gaza and the internal pressure on him to take some action. The contradictory stakes become clear, as Erdogan wants to protect and enhance Turkey's position in the Islamic world, using the Palestinian cause as one of the platforms and issues. To this end, as Erdogan often does, he made a fiery statement, declaring the end of the declared political romance and affirming the continuation of the marriage of interests between the two countries.